yet another kind of insane, crazy, wild episode of DTF St. Louis.
It keeps getting better each and every week. We learn something new. We walk away with something that makes us say this show is just one of a kind.
You know, it was kind of a jaw dropper at the beginning of this episode because we have this song Forever Young playing and then this montage from the magazine.
Yeah.
If you've seen it, you know.
Yes.
And I just, again, I'm like, well, that's something I've never seen before in television.
I mean, if you're an Indiana Jones fan, you can now picture him in this light.
Or not, I guess, is one option. Well, welcome everybody to DTF St. Louis, the unofficial after show. I am Lauren Trager, Chief Investigative Reporter here at First Alert 4, which is a TV station in St. Louis. Again, a central part of this show is a TV station in St. Louis and a TV weatherman. We're a TV station in St. Louis, bringing you this podcast. We've been having a lot of fun on this show,
so much fun. Yeah.
And Elliott, we've been so glad to have you too.
I'm glad to be here. It's been a pleasure to be able to talk about this show, navigate this show with you, talk about the absurdity, but also talk about the heart and the messages and the themes that the show is tackling. It's been a thrill of a ride so far.
What did you think about this episode?
You know, not to be in the moment, but I think this might be my favorite so far. I think a good TV show gets better as it goes along, and it's not diminishing what came before. If anything, it's making the experience even more better because you're just enhancing things, you're learning more, and it hasn't gotten stale. Like, it keeps me on my toes. I can never anticipate which way we're going. Not only this has such a good balance of humor, awkward comedy, but then there's some deep conversations about these people and what they've gone through and how people want to put on certain masks and who they really are. It's just been such a fascinating journey so far.
You know, the storyline I've been thinking about is actually not a huge story, right? It's not like we're going over multiple years or we know it's one central story, which is how did Floyd die and why is Floyd dead, and these really three characters. What do you think about the pacing in this episode? Is it picking up then where we're finally going to wrap towards the end? Yeah. Or is it, again, kind of to your point, it seems like it kind of just does this nice dance back and forth?
I think purposefully they're keeping us in this kind of area where you don't know what answers we're going to get and how they're going to be presented to us. Like, we know, obviously, the central theme or the plot is Floyd dies. How does he die? But I'm finding myself, which is a sign of a good show, I'm almost just more intrigued about all the integral details and nuances of the conversations being had, how Floyd is able to, as we'll talk about, willingly know that his wife is in an affair and is it a part of that experience?
Because he's looking for mind blown.
It is crazy. So, I mean, again, I'm very on board trying to figure it out. We'll talk about who we think who killed Floyd, but I'm just so interested in these characters, which speaks to the acting, the writing, the staging of it all, the comedy of it all. It just really hits you on all fronts.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many revelations in this that we have to break down one by one. Yeah. But I was thinking about this interview that the detectives have with Carol kind of in the beginning of the episode. And first of all, I'm enjoying the detectives as we have, and we've talked about this, but this was the first time I feel like we've seen them really working together.
They bonded. Yeah, they bonded in this episode. It's almost like they bonded over Carol's awkwardness and her dominating the conversation of, repeat yourself. What do you? I can't hear you. They had a moment there. And I think from there, we're starting to see Homer is starting to open up to the idea of Plum. Yeah, she comes from another generation. She might not have the same life experiences or the same job history like he has because he's been in it a lot longer, but there's still something that she could bring to the table. And now she's opened his eyes to, he thought it was just an open, closed case, but there is so much more to this case that he could have never imagined. And I thought this episode really explored that idea of opening up to new experiences, whether we see Floyd opening up to this new relationship or Homer opening himself up to there's more to a case than what you think.
And again, I feel like they're kind of working, Floyd and Plum are now working in tandem as opposed to kind of against each other or well, I have this idea and you have that idea. Do you feel like they're kind of along the same pathway now, working together, buddy cops?
It took a while, just like any relationship. It takes a while to get to know someone. But I think what I like about the Plum character is she's at this level where she never gets too high, never gets too low. She just keeps it there. And those people are very hard to read. I'm sometimes can be like that sometimes, but I think Homer's starting to understand how she works, how she navigates things, how she handles conversations. And again, this episode was all about opening yourself up to new ways of exploring new avenues of whether it's investigation or a romantic relationship.
You think you're hard to read, Elliott? I don't think so. I feel like you're like, at least about the shows, you're an open book.
Yeah. I can sometimes, I keep, reserved, but, once you get to know me, like you said, I'm a pretty open book. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And obviously one of the themes, I think, as we talk about ourselves a little bit, is this like public, private persona and what do we have? And again, I still wish I could learn a little bit more about the detectives. I just feel like we don't really know what's motivating them, especially, and just jump around here, but with this ending.
Yes.
This ending really made my brain start to wonder what's really going on with these detectives, though.
Yeah. I think... So to me, the detectives are kind of positioned as like kind of our entry point into the story. They're our eyes, our ears on the case. And I'm totally with you. Like, we've gotten more of Plum's life. We see her husband in this episode. We go to her home. First episode, we kind of see that they have sex positive and porn positive, I should say. But yeah, I think there's going to be, I don't know if the show's going to have like a moment where we're going to find out something about Homer that we never knew, but it seems like it's kind of leading that way because it has been so one-sided with Plum as far as getting a little bit of information and no information about Homer. So there might be something there.
And so far they've been so above board by the book, but then this ending, again, not to spoil it right to the end here, but I kind of go, okay, is Homer really pushing her to do something very unethical, something that could get her in, she could lose her job. I mean, I know they both have a desire to solve this.
Yeah.
And it's fiction and everything, but you think a real detective could probably get in some hot water for that.
I think, faking someone's application, I don't know the law, but I'm pretty sure it's illegal.
Social security number and everything.
Yeah. So I am very curious to know where that lands. If it is, hopefully it's nothing, I don't think Homer's trying to get her fired. I think they are just trying to solve the case. But again, what length will you go to try to solve this case? And we see they're doing something illegal. So I do think that's going to come back and unfortunately bite them, both of them or just Plum. We'll see. But that is a very shocking because you would never anticipate her to do that because it seems, to your point, she's been very kind of, she's open to new ideas of exploring the case, but she seems to also kind of stick by the book and stick to the rules. But I don't know what encouraged her to do what she did at the end, which is,
If you haven't seen it, we had a former detective on our last episode. I wish now we'd gotten a chance to ask him about that because I bet he would have had some thoughts on that. Wouldn't hold up with a jury, I don't think.
No, and that could be, to foreshadowing future episodes, that could be the breaking point when you go outside the lines and you break the law. That defeats your whole case. So that could bite them in that sense, that they get all the evidence, they find all this stuff about Carol, but can't use it because the way they went about to get the information was completely illegal. So maybe
our detectives are not normal. It just looked that way across the street.
There you go.
I don't know. We will see. But they are putting pieces together.
Yes.
They suddenly, because I had thought about this other bike. We knew multiple people were riding the bikes, and they finally said, we got to go find this other bike. And I'm kind of surprised it took them that long.
Yeah, I think this goes back to Homer, unfortunately, kind of, I don't say slowed the case down, but he was just so close-minded to the possibilities that Plum had in mind that now he's finally on board, and it's like, oh, okay, and now we're starting to click. And we talked about this, I think, last episode. The timeline of everything seems to be kind of hard to follow, so I think in our real time, we're thinking that it took so long to get to that point, but probably in reality, it's probably just been a couple days since they first brought him in. So,
true.
But yeah, you would think that will be one of the first things. But again, it took Homer a little bit to get on board, but now he's on the train.
Yeah, and then you touched on already. I think sort of a mind-blowing revelation was that Floyd not only knew about it, because we knew he knew about it.
Yes, right.
We knew he was A-okay with it, and that he was helping facilitate this affair between his now best friend and his wife.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, that was a quick turn, because last episode we're thinking, oh boy, this is about to blow up in everybody's face. And yet it's like, I have serious FOMO. That's what I took away from that, is he was like, I want to join the fun. I want to be there.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact verbiage, but he basically said, I want to escape life too. I want to, as we know, him and Carol have years of debt that has definitely hurt their marriage, hurt their relationship. But there's this, I think he's, I don't want to say jealous, but I think he wants to experience kind of stepping out of the everyday life, because it seems like the dreams that Carol and Clark are having are just like, I don't know how long they're in that room, hours maybe, possibly, but those 2-3 hours is just, they can be someone else. They can be who they always imagine to be. They can be with the people they might want to live or have a life experience with in another lifetime. So Floyd wants to be a part of that journey and hide in the closet.
I think he calls it the cool side of the curtain or something.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking back at maybe the exact quote too, but it's sort of like he acknowledges, which I thought was an interesting point, that, you know, sex is not always just sex. It is intimacy, and it's about bonds between people, and that he understands that, you know, they might be building that, and he really seems genuine on wanting to build that as well. But again, it might be kind of shocking. I liked the moment with the hotel, the Quality Garden Suites manager, when she talks about the charges and the retroactive, and she was like, "No, they're a threesome.
They're a threesome.
That's what that is." You know, and I was like, "Oh, okay, she's just telling it like it is."
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about it for weeks now, that Floyd is 100% a cup filler, that he would much more prefer for someone else to be happy, to be enjoying their best life more than he himself. Of course, we see in this episode, he wants to get on he wants to experience it, the reverse of what Clark was doing, but he does seem to put other people's happiness first, and we see how that looks in this episode, which was just so interesting. This dynamic of these three have been so fascinating, and the actors they have in these roles have been playing it where I don't know if you feel bad or feel a certain way towards Carol, but there's just so many facets to these characters. They're just so interesting each and every week.
I'm conflicted about Carol. I'm not sure how you feel about it, and I think this is really to Linda Cardellini's credit in a lot of ways, is like, it's really hard to know when she's being genuine and when she's not. Obviously, when she's running and she's listening to her audiobook, it feels very calculated and manipulative. But then there's other times where she seems to turn on the charm, and you're kind of wondering, is she being genuine or is she being manipulative there? Her manner of speaking, we've discussed all of this, but this episode, I have to say, again, kind of made me reframe Carol, because then she gets sort of propositioned in the end again.
Yes.
Where then they say, can we flip it around? And now Clark watches, and there's this moment where her face drops kind of. It's this subtle body language, and I'm like, is she just... I don't know where she stands.
And that's such a great character. That's such a fun character. When you can't figure out who they are, what they're thinking, what's going on in their head, that makes it so fascinating. And then we know what we found out in this episode. Of course, we talked about a bit of the ending, but we've been talking about what happened with her ex-husband, right? Is he alive? Did she take him out? She has a crime that was expunged. So what did she do? What did Carol do? And we know from a couple episodes ago, she told her son that she is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her son and her relationship with her son. So Carol she is so fascinating to me on every single level. And to your point, you don't know if it's genuine, if it's calculated, if it's all part of one of the tapes said, when you get to that point in your life, cut out the fat. So you immediately think,
dead weight.
Literally dead weight.
Exactly.
Cut out Floyd. But then it's almost too on the nose at this point. But sometimes the truth can just be right in front of you, which could be part of the show, is that people are who they are. They tell you who they are when you first meet them or once you get to know them. So she has been the wild card of the show. And like you mentioned, Linda has been playing it perfectly.
Yeah, and you can it's hard to read in the moments, is what I keep coming back to, is you can tell when you're lying to the detectives about this, but then this other part you're talking about, money troubles and everything, feels very genuine and authentic, and it's just been fascinating. And I really liked that scene where the three of them are outside, towards the end, and they're talking about what they're transitioning to in their intimate lives, and then Floyd goes to make lemonade, but he comes back because there's no lemonade mix, there's no lemons, there's no sugar, and it's just like, again, Carol's like,
this is the life I live. This is why I am, exploring all these new avenues, and not that it makes an excuse, but you can understand how someone in her position would, I don't want to say, again, take out her husband. You can understand her plight in regards to, this life has been something I did not want. I've tried my best to figure it out, and this is the last resort. And again, does that mean that she killed her husband? Only time will tell. Okay,
so then I also wondered this episode, because Floyd felt a little more calculated in this episode of the Amphezine.
Yes.
Where he was like, I need this, and I need you to do it for me. And it's the first time he's really asked Clark, directly for something that he needed. And it kind of made me question, is he Has he been in on this? Does he know more than we know? Because, again, we've talked about how much he's very likable, very affable. But does he have more of an insidious role to play in this?
I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, that I hope that they don't drop the shoe on us and say, no, Floyd wasn't who you think he was this whole time. That could be in play, because you're totally right. This seems to be the first time that I can think of that he was very direct with Floyd, or Clark asking him directly, can you help me with this? Because every time it's been, Clark has been offering, and he's been kind of hesitant, but he eventually agrees. But this seems to be the one time in this show that he's been like, I need your help. Can you help me with this situation? I want to be, I want to be intimate with my wife or whatnot. So there could be something in play, and to the whole idea of he was the one that was totally on board with this affair. He's, orchestrating the whole ordeal. Is Floyd involved? Yeah, that's a possibility. Everyone's a suspect at this point, even the victim.
Has been all along, and we don't have that many episodes left to find out, so we're going to get there. Some amazing moments, though, in this show. Again, it's the details in the show that I think are so great. Sometimes it's the subtle details. I noticed when Clark was playing headbands, it said, I am an umpire up there, so another umpire reference.
Yep.
Then we have this whole issue with the Peyronie's disease.
Yes.
What did you make of that sequence of scenes? It was not short. It was a good portion of the episode where we think we're finally going to find out what happened.
We talked off camera that it would be hilarious, but also kind of like, I want to know if they don't tell us what happened to him. But the lead up to, he got hit by a car and a pole hit him and he fell on himself. Nope, that wasn't it. Oh, it's an umbrella. That's a weird way to have that injury happen. No, it wasn't the umbrella. And he just goes on and on and on. And Clark's like, what happened? Oh, much longer story. I'll tell you another time. If they don't tell us, I do think that is a running, funny, ongoing joke. But I think it's important. Whatever it is, I think it plays into the overall story. But it was just and it just goes back to like this tone of this show. It has these little side quests, these little random acts that we think is random at the time, but it ends up being, a little bit more important to the story. But yeah, that story was very funny.
Well, and, on our show, right, the F stands for facts.
Yes.
That's what we're here doing, guys, is helping maybe educate on a few things, talking about this show. And we learned last week that Amphezine is not a real drug.
Not a real drug, yeah.
But Peyronie's disease is a real thing. And coming up actually a little bit later, we're going to be talking with a urologist, a doctor, who has some really interesting statistics about Peyronie's disease, how it does impact people's lives, and far more people than we might even know. So some of the stigma that's around it. So again, it's sort of like that juxtaposition of these comic moments, talking about something that is, very serious. But there's comedy in it too, and maybe helping break down some of the stigmas, and comedy can do that sometimes and help you talk about things. So we're going to get into that in just a little bit, but that's what this show is here for, and glad to be able to talk about it all. You never know what we're going to talk about on this show.
Never know. I mean, and then there's also too, before I forget, I know you mentioned it a while ago, the Emmy of it all. Like, she's just there, and it just started to make me think, could she have been involved? Like, did she? In my mind, I'm thinking that she almost could think that Clark was having an affair with Floyd. Maybe there's because she has, she probably saw the information. Oh, he has life insurance. They're going on vacation together.
They're always texting each other.
Did Emmy was she the one that was responsible for the death?
Still the biggest wild card. Like, there's got to be a reason we know next to nothing about her this far into the show.
It's almost, watching so many movies and shows, there's just enough screen time where she could be a potential suspect. But then there's also that side of just like, it's just showing that side of his life, how closed off to that part of his life he is. But Emmy, there's something there. There has to be something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the last thing I wanted to talk about, because I thought it was such an interesting scene, was the hearing and visually impaired person.
Yes.
And I would really like to explore and welcome any thoughts that anybody out there who's listening has to. I feel like this show is raising good awareness about ASL.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen, maybe you have, but so many shows that integrate ASL into the dialogue in a really beautiful way sometimes.
It was, so the scene I think you're referring to is the young man going to his homecoming and talk about comedy. The last thing that Floyd says that he's running out of the room is hilarious. But it just goes to show this whole thing is an elaborate fantasy dream, making sure that people are fulfilled in their life. But then he sees his kid going to literally walk into the pool. And then that conversation he has, he calls him a cool kid and how, fun he's going to have that night and how he helped him out. And even Carol and Clark just sit there. He's just such a good guy, such a kind guy. We talked about, the flashback of what happened to him, that moment where he found his purpose and how it's a community. He wants to help. He wants to help people. We know that about Floyd. He always wants to help people. So, yeah, I thought that was such a tender and heartfelt and meaningful scene. And to your point, I think the show has made it a point to show that more than I can think of in any other shows regarding that.
And I liked how, even to touch on the Peyronie's disease again, we're waiting to hear about what happened to him that caused that. But I think that was sort of his origin story of ASL. I mean, it stood with him all that series and sequence of events to find what truly is his passion. Then he comes home and Carol is pretty angry about it. So you have that, the tension working against each other. But it's been really cool the way that different things weave together.
It's 100%. I love how this show, again, takes something so crazy, so absurd of that story, but then at the heart of it, he found his purpose. And whatever happens, if we ever find out, he was still able to find that light at the end of the tunnel. And again, he found something that meant something to him. It's such a great example how this show plays with its tone.
Yeah. So much more to talk about, and we'll continue right after this break. Well, welcome back. As we've said so often on this show, it feels like the F on our show on this podcast here stands for facts. So that's why we've been bringing on some really interesting guests to talk about different issues. And I think we're really excited to talk with you, Dr. Maj Islam. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you letting me be on this podcast.
Okay, so you are with Urology of St. Louis.
That's right.
And you actually specialize in Peyronie's disease.
That's correct.
So we have heard a lot about Peyronie's disease in this show, in mostly a comic sort of context. Potentially, would you say, Elliott?
100%.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But unlike other things in the show that are made up, this is a real medical issue.
Absolutely.
So tell us, what is Peyronie's disease?
Yeah, so Peyronie's disease is, the technical definitions is any kind of penile deformity that happens with an erection. So men that have an erection that have some kind of abnormality, and that abnormality most often is curvature. It can be things like hourglass deformities, so indentations in the side. It can be S-curves. It can also sometimes be length loss of the penis. But in general, it's some kind of erectile penile abnormality of the penis. And it's a bit more, it happens a bit more frequently than most people think.
Is it often that you see it portrayed in media, I guess? Is it unusual to see someone talking about it on a show?
Sure. I mean, absolutely not, right? It's one of these things where, there's not a whole lot of, until recently at least, not a whole lot of awareness around Peyronie's disease. It's something that usually is a little more difficult to talk about for obvious reasons, not only in the media, but also in real men in real life talking to their buddies or their doctors about it. But also it's just something that becomes a little bit more difficult to portray in a way that is, positive, negative, in a way where there's information that seems like it's relevant or appropriate to discuss, basically.
So is it common, kind of rare, or how often does it occur?
So more common than you think. So 1 out of 10 men actually has Peyronie's disease. 1 out of 10 guys has some aspect of this deformity that can be bothersome enough to where it's defined as something that's bothersome to the patient to want to do something about it.
And what does bothersome look like? I mean, typically, is it something that it is impacting their lives in some way? Yeah,
absolutely. So with Peyronie's disease, the main things are that it can be uncomfortable. It can cause discomfort just to have an erection. It can make certain positions during sexual activity uncomfortable, not only for the man, but for their partner, male or female partner. It can also be cosmetically displeasing enough to a man where it's bothersome just by existing, as strange as that sounds. So a lot of men really are affected not only anatomically, if you will, or physically, but also psychologically, mentally with this. And so it can get to a point with a combination of all of the above where it can affect relationships. It can also affect men's self-esteem, affect really the whole picture of a guy feeling like a guy, as strange as that sounds.
I mean, I certainly think we've seen that in our main character, where he's having those tensions in his own life, which he directly attributes to this disease.
Yeah, confidence levels low. His relationship with his wife seems to be on the fritz because that is something that they're not able to engage in those activities. So it's, as everything you just said, is literally what we see in our main character, Floyd, which is,
Now, in the show, we were talking about a little bit before we sat down here, is the origin of his Peyronie's disease is a moment, again, of comedy because it's sort of this, like, we don't know exactly what happened, but he certainly intimates that it's a trauma, like a major trauma event and an injury that caused his Peyronie's. Is that typical, or how do people normally get it?
So the classic story, the classic presenting symptom behind getting Peyronie's disease usually is some kind of trauma. We usually call it micro trauma. So a majority of the time, upwards of 80 to 85% of the time, men that have Peyronie's don't have this, what we call inciting event. They don't have this situation that they can say, oh yes, I remember that specific time where this horrific injury happened, like in the show, and then after that I started having the deformity. More often than not, it's, again, a micro trauma, something that happens usually during sexual activity, usually during an erection. Most commonly, it's a little bit of bending during sexual activity of the erection, where then the man doesn't have any major pain. They don't have a pop or bruising. Usually they continue through the process of sexual activity. And then the curvature comes about because of this, what we call plaque, because of a scar tissue that forms in the lining of the penis. And so it's something, again, that most men will say, I don't remember what caused it, but it happened overnight. But again, it's usually that bending, that inflammation that happens after the bending that causes this plaque, the scar tissue that forms.
But you're not born with it.
That's right. With Peyronie's disease, you're not born with it. It's something that happens from some kind of event. That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Can it be treated? How do you treat it?
Sure. So that's probably the most important thing. So it's extremely treatable. So Peyronie's disease is, again, one of these things where the awareness, the knowledge behind knowing you have it is half the battle, but then finding out or understanding what your options are for men that have Peyronie's is super important. So there's multiple options for treatment. There's non-surgical treatment options. There's also surgical treatment options. As you would imagine, surgical treatment options are a bit more invasive. The non-surgical treatment options can be medications that can get to the point where men have enough improvement in their curvature where they don't need any more treatment. And, about 95% of the time, once you've had treatment, you don't need any more treatment after that, meaning the recurrence rate, the rate of it coming back, is pretty darn low. So oftentimes when we have patients that come in to talk about their Peyronie's disease in my practice, I go over the treatment options. We oftentimes will lean towards non-surgical treatments if patients are candidates for obvious reasons. And most of my men leave the office when we're done with treatments pretty happy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
To the point where you mentioned going back a little bit with the self-esteem and changing their life and their lifestyles, are there, for those that might not have the funds to afford the surgery or continuation of treatment, are there outlets for people to have, people to talk to about that self-esteem to kind of help them deal with it, or have groups where people have the same experience where they can kind of share their experience with each other and kind of lift each other up in those
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There's certain support groups that are starting to become much more robust and much more available for men. And to your point, there's actually quite a bit of data, a bit of literature that we've started doing in these last few years looking at the psychological impact that Peyronie's has. About 50% of guys have stated that they feel like it does affect their self-esteem, that they feel depressive symptoms. A certain percentage, higher than you'd think, actually have clinically diagnosed depression stemming from their Peyronie's disease. So it is something that really we've started to try to hone in on in terms of making sure guys feel that they have somewhere to go in terms of even just talking about it, along with the fact that that it is treatable, and oftentimes treating it does improve all of the above. So yes, there's support groups, there's forums online, there's websites, there's chats, there's also certain types of therapists, sex therapists, as I'm sure you guys have learned recently, that deal a lot with this, that can help quite significantly for those men.
And do you encourage people to, seek medical treatment? And I guess to the extent that, could a show like this actually help break down the stigma and help people feel more comfortable about seeking out support, whether it's peer groups or from a doctor?
Gosh, I hope so. Just because, again, it's one of these things where men really struggle talking about it. It's something that you don't go to the golf course and talk to your buddies about. It's something that, isn't out there in the media. There's not a whole lot of these, Peyronie's awareness days or months or anything like that where men can say, okay, yes, I do have that, and this is something I can, get treatment for or talk to someone about. Oftentimes, it's difficult even to go into your primary care physician and talk to someone that is not that is a stranger about your penis. And so I think there's certain things that we're starting to do in the media to help improve awareness, but also, gosh, if this show, allows viewers, certain men, to see that they have an issue, or maybe their partners to talk to their partners about the fact that they have this issue, then I think that there would be a lot more men that could be quite a bit happier in their situations, frankly, but also be potentially, people will become more willing to talk to their providers, their friends, their partners about the fact that this is something that's bothering them. Because the other thing is, it can be difficult to even talk to your partner about something like this, because you don't want to cause them any, stress, harm, or also some partners will think it's their fault. It's something that happened because of them, or because they participated in something that caused harm to someone's penis. And so all of that, I hope, is in the pipeline.
The flip side of it, though, do you sometimes kind of hate to see when a medical issue is a source of comedy? Do you go kind of like, oh, it's like, I don't know, let's not make fun of it. Maybe it's people's first time hearing about it, but they're laughing about it. Is that a good or a bad thing?
Sure. It's tough. I think for something like this, any press is good press, meaning, the fact that there's awareness in something that there hasn't been a whole lot of awareness or media discussions about, it is important. I don't know of any kind of public setting, media, et cetera, where Peyronie's has been discussed, period. And so, frankly, I don't think it's negative at all. The fact that it's something that's a little more comedic, I think comes with the territory. Frankly, you're talking about someone who has an injury to their penis in real life that's going to be devastating. In a TV show, it's something that I'm sure, has been done in the past before. Injuries to the genital area is something, unfortunately, that we all laugh about a lot
often,
on TV shows.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so finally, was there a guy named Peyronie? Is that where it comes from? There was a man?
It's a French, I think it's French, a French physician way back when, who was the first person that described Peyronie. So yes,
interesting.
Yes, a lot of things in medicine are named after the person that describes it, more often than not, someone way back when.
Mm-hmm. It's Floyd's disease on this show, and actually he calls it a disability.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody would classify it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. I think, I to each their own. That being said, I think it's something that can be disabling enough to a man to affect multiple parts of their life, where I don't think it's unreasonable.
Yeah. Any other questions or final thoughts?
This has been very educational for sure. I know this is a fictional world, but I almost wish Floyd had this type of information provided to him, because I don't think there's been any mention of him having it cured. It's just like something he deals with
he says he treats it with medication, but like blood thinners and almost sort of like dangerous type medications. And then, of course, he adds on a different type of medication that is a complicating medication. And we might wonder if that's what caused his death in this show. A made-up drug called Amphezine.
Sure.
So, yeah, it does make you wonder. I feel like he needs a good Dr. Islam to be like, here's what we can really do to help you.
Yeah.
Well, I really hope, to your point, that, that guys do find someone to, talk about it. Really, it's important to find if you have Peyronie's disease, finding a urologist, finding someone that deals with this often, so that you can go through a treatment path that's safe, but also a treatment path that's effective. And again, having that conversation with your primary care physician or your urologist is key. And, to every guy like Floyd, there's, again, another numerous guys out there that have Peyronie's disease that are uncomfortable to talk about, and there's a lot of Floyds out there that really probably need some help and could use it.
Well, I appreciate you. Yes. Dr. Amphezine from Urology of St. Louis. We are so grateful to have you and your time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time.
So, yeah, we've had all kinds of interesting conversations on this podcast, the Unofficial After Show, like all kinds of cool guests.
Very similar to the show. You never know what to expect.
That's right. Yeah. And I appreciate that we're getting to kind of bring some of this stuff up. I think it brings awareness and maybe gets people think, just like shows do. It gets you thinking about other stuff.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
So what are you looking forward to? I mean, we only have
2 episodes.
That's it.
Yeah.
And are you really kind of looking forward to buckling up for these 2?
I am. I'm at the point now where I'm pretty confident that they're going to stick the landing. As I mentioned, yes, I want to know what happened to Floyd, but I also want to have a good conclusion to these stories, to the characters and their stories and where they end up. And I hope it all comes together. And based on the 5 episodes we've seen so far, I don't have any evidence to prove that it will be a letdown.
But of course, you can always tell Elliott your opinion if you want to.
Yes.
How can people find you, Elliott?
On all over the internet, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, all the different various outlets that you want to talk about movies and shows. You can probably find me there.
Yep. Hit subscribe because you got to support your work. You do such a good job breaking all this down for us. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram, First Alert 4. You can email us always at DTFSTL@firstalert4.com. But we're not giving up. We're going to be here for these last 2 episodes. Yeah. And we hope you join us for DTF St. Louis, the unofficial after show. Thanks.